Okay, willkommen. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see so many of you here to learn something about German, the German language and German culture. My name is Sascha Stollhans. I'm the school's liaison and outreach officer in the Department of Languages and Cultures here at Lancaster University. And I also happen to be teaching German here, so you will hear a bit more from me in a minute. Now, please, can we ask you to switch off your microphones and your cameras? That will just improve the quality of the meeting a lot. But we would love you to engage with us, to let us know your thoughts, to ask questions, to make comments about the things we're about to tell you. So please, if you pop all your thoughts, comments, questions in the chat, so you can see here, if you click on this little icon here, you will be open to write something in the chat. And my colleague, Chris Witter, will be monitoring the chat, and he will be putting all your questions to the presenters at the end of the session during our Q&A. Now, we've split the session into two parts. So in the first half, we're going to look at some interesting aspects about the German language. And this part will be led by my colleague, Marion Heuchert. Marion, can you give us a wave? I think she might be waving. I can't see her right now. And sorry?
Sorry, I did. I'm here.
Ah, brilliant, perfect. And my colleague, Professor Allyson Fiddler, who is an expert in Austrian studies. So she will present the Austrian side of things.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Allyson. And in the second half, I will be presenting something on German culture. As I said, please do pop any questions and comments in the chat, and we will ask the presenters all your questions at the end. Right, so without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Marion.
Okay, hello everybody. Can you all hear me? Yeah, okay. My name is Marion Heuchert, and I will talk about some fun facts about the German language, about the Germans and their language today. And hopefully there is something in there for everybody. So it is meant for people to get a good idea who don't have any knowledge of German so far. So you'll absolutely be able to follow, but hopefully there are some facts that also the more advanced amongst yourself don't know yet. So in this part, we look at some fun facts about the Germans. We explore the common history of German and English, and we then take a closer look at some of the curiosities of the German language. Fun facts about the Germans. There is a lot out there. There's lots of stereotypes. I decided on the 3 B's, 2 of which you will be familiar with. The third one might be a surprise. So let's talk about bread first. I personally love bread. Most Germans love bread and are known for this. And the bread loaves, as you can see them there, are around for approximately 6,000 years, not invented by the Germans, but by the Egyptians, when they invented the sourdough. And in Germany, currently, there are over 3,000 types of bread registered. So you can register bread types. It's a lot. You just have to go to a German bakery. It's amazing. In 2018, every German purchased 21.2 kilogram bread on average. And while we usually eat it for breakfast with, some cheese, sausage, honey, jam on top of it, we also like to include it in our dinner and just as a snack in between. And this is mirrored in the language because in our language, dinner is traditionally called Abendbrot, which literally translates to evening bread. And for a snack in between, we like to say Brotzeit, bread time. Next one up is beer, and you will see there is a connection to bread. So until recently, beer was officially considered a food in the south of Germany, which is quite amazing. And in the medieval age, after a baking day, followed a brewing day. So what about this? So beer and bread are made with the same ingredients, grain, water, and yeast. And you may have heard of the German Reinheitsgebot. So yeah, there are not any more other ingredients in German beer. And therefore beer is also called liquid bread, flüssiges Brot, not only in the south, but all over Germany. Now comes the third fun fact. Beds. That might be surprising for you. So Germans are not considered to be the most romantic nation out there, and it might be due to their sleeping arrangements. So let's have a quick look at those. Most German couples have separate duvets and even 2 single mattresses in a double bed. So I wasn't aware that this is such a strange thing out there until I started to, move around and discover other spaces in the world. For the practical German mind, there are some advantages to it. The mattress can be tailored to the person and therefore provide a better sleep, prevent aches, etc. There is, however, a big disadvantage, and it is the so-called visitor gap. In German, Besucherritze, which is the gap in between the mattresses. It's not very nice if you roll into that. Okay, we move on to German and English. So German and English have the same origin. It's both Indo-Germanic languages and they go down the West Germanic branch. And you can see this in the little picture here. So the German language today, as it is the result of 2 very important Germanic consonant shifts. And I want to take a quick look. It's just an introduction, so there's linguistically much more to it. Please just post any questions in the chat. We want to have a look at the second one, because that's important for English. And also, if you want to learn German as a language, the High German consonant shift. And this one altered a number of consonants in German. For example, what was double P before became PF, as in Apfel. So in English, you still say apple, double P, right? And you do find this also still in the northern dialects of German. So you still find this older form without those second consonant shift. So in Plattdeutsch, Low German, and you can see that has an extra branch in the picture, it is called Appel. And also in Kölsch, which is the dialect from Cologne, we say Appel, which is even closer to the English apple. So as an English native speaker, as someone with a good command of English, you know so many German words already. And sometimes it might help to look at the dialect to understand even more of them. Just a quick excursus, where is German spoken? So it is the official language in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Belgium, and South Tyrol. Which also makes it the language with the most native speakers, with the largest number of native speakers within the European Union. And it's spoken in many other countries as mother tongue by part of the population. Many Germans emigrated to America, in parts of Africa, German is spoken, and also in many East European countries, you can find lots of German speakers. And worldwide, we have about 96.6 million people who speak German as their first language. Let's move on to some curiosities of the German language. German likes English. We use many English words, anglicisms in German, but sometimes we alter their meaning. So we love to take an English word and make it German. Usually this is done by just putting an article in front of it. So we have 3 articles, der, die, das, and I gave you an example here. Home office. It is das Home Office in German. And you might think of the ministerial department that's responsible for immigration, amongst other things here. Or you might think of this little study in your house, so the workspace you set up. But we go one step further. And in German, we, instead of saying I work from home or I work remotely, we say I do home office today. Ich mache heute home office. So brought you some of this, and can you maybe guess the meaning? Maybe you can use the chat to post your idea or just think about it for a second. So let's start easy. What is a handy? Is it a mobile phone, a tool, or something that looks like a hand? It is das Handy, by the way. And I give you the answer. It is indeed a mobile phone. It's quite funny for most of my students when they learn it for the first time. Maybe you have a chuckle. And I brought you a second one. What is a Beamer? This is der Beamer in German. Is it a car, a tool used in science fiction films to transport people from one place to another, or a projector. Now, while 2 would be the cool answer, it is indeed just a projector found in almost every classroom nowadays. Okay, let's have a look at some unique German words. Like most other languages, German has a number of words that are difficult or even impossible to translate. And I'm sure you came across quite a few of them already in English. For example, Zeitgeist, Schadenfreude, Wanderlust, they are used a lot here. If you don't know their meaning and would like to know it, just use the chat. Happy to answer all the questions later. But I brought you some that you might not have heard of already. So do you think you can guess the meaning of Kummerspeck, Fremdschämen, or der innere Schweinehund? Let's have a closer look. Okay, Kummerspeck, literally grief bacon. Speck is bacon, Kummer is grief. It looks a little bit like this, and it is the extra weight that you put on by comfort eating during emotionally challenging times, or usually like often after breakup. But yeah, I guess these times we are in now might be emotionally challenging. So don't fret it if you put on some Kummerspeck. Fremdschämen. So schämen means to feel embarrassed. And fremd means foreign, someone else's, external. Now, it looks a little bit like this for a monkey or for a human. And it means to feel ashamed or embarrassed on someone else's behalf. So I'm sure you know that feeling when you see something really, really cringeworthy, either on TV or in real life, and you go like, oh my God, no, no, please don't. That's Fremdschämen. And I have a third one for you. It's my personal favorite, der innere Schweinehund. It's literally the inner pig dog. And nobody has ever seen one because it's internal. But it might look a little bit like this. And it is this weak part inside you and inside everyone that just wants to lounge around on the sofa, not getting out of the pajamas, play video games, watch TV, just lacks any sort of motivation to be productive in any sense. Again, I do have the suspicion that the inner pig dog, der innere Schweinehund, grew lately for some people during home office. Apologies. And alongside some Kummerspeck, maybe. And I come to my last curiosity, the noun compounds. So German is known for its very long words. And I brought you one here. Rindfleisch-Etikettungsüberwachungsaufgabenübertragungsgesetz. It means the law concerning the delegation of duties for the supervision of cattle marking and the labeling of beef. And this one has been deemed too unpractical, even for German bureaucrats. That says something. Behind that is the interesting fact that we can create countless words that just sticking together different nouns and make it one word. So it's hard to tell how many words the German language has, like even for the Duden, because we can create new ones all of the time. And there is a logic to this. So we do use the last word as a basis word. And then we use the first word or more than one word to describe it further, yeah, and to give it a different meaning maybe. And I gave you a simple example here with Tisch, table, and I can create Schreibtisch, Küchentisch, and Nachttisch, and that translates to desk, writing table, kitchen table, and bedside table, literally night table. So once you know that, it's quite easy to create new words and to guess the meaning of words you haven't seen before if you know the single meanings. Let's try this and see how easy it is for you. So I have das Stinktier, literally smelly animal. What might it be? A type of cheese, a skunk, or a smelly person? Might have an idea already. It is indeed a skunk, smelly animal, quite logical. right? And if you are here because you've seen Sascha's nice teaser, he promised that we will resolve the word Backpfeifengesicht. So here it comes, das Backpfeifengesicht, literally cheek, whistle, face. What might that be? Is it a person who whistles, a face in need of a slap, or a person who has very red cheeks? It is a face in need of a slap. It's not such a nice word, therefore, right? So if you see someone who looks like they really need a slap, you really want to slap them, they just have one of those faces, that would be a Backpfeifengesicht. Okay, this is where I leave you and I hand over to my colleague, Professor Allyson Fiddler, who takes you into the Austrian language and their curiosities for a bit. Thanks.
Okay, while Professor Fiddler is getting ready, I might just briefly say, just had a message from someone saying that they can't access the chat. I'm not really sure why that is. So you should actually be able to access the chat. But if you can't, please do message me privately or message Chris Witter privately, and we can look into this for you.
Okay, yes, do ask your questions, particularly on the research stuff, which I won't be going into much at the end. But anyway, so where is this Austria place? Let's see it in the larger scale. And there's little Austria. Here's our Wiener Schnitzel in the middle, the outline in blue. And I'm obviously only talking about current day Austria, none of the predecessor states. I'm not talking about the vast lands that were Austrian, Austro-Hungarian Empire, or indeed the Austrian Empire. So just this little country here, and you quite possibly can see how many countries it's surrounded by, and therefore work out, maybe in the chat you've had a quick guess, how many countries have borders with Austria. So just quickly doing a clockwise look here, we've got a large border with Germany and the Czech Republic here. We've got Slovakia, Hungary, Slovenia, Italy, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. So I make that 8. I hope you do too. So this is a country you might expect from its history, and indeed still being surrounded by lots of other countries that might have linguistic influence on Austria. So I'm going to just now say Grüß Gott, and not just Guten Tag. Grüß Gott is a kind of semi-formal greeting, greet God, but it's still very much current in Bavaria and Austria as a way of saying hello. And Servus is a popular way of saying both hello and goodbye, a bit like the Italian ciao, I suppose. It's a versatile little word. So I figured, since this was a taster, I ought to take that a bit literally and go and see what I might be able to find in my own lockdown house to help us out here. This is before the weekly shop, obviously, looking a bit bare in my fridge, but we have a cauliflower, a potato, some tomatoes in there. I found some other things in my cupboard, some apricots there, bunged them into my frying pan here, and asked myself, well, you probably are as well, what on earth am I going to cook with this lot? It could be an interesting concoction in my frying pan, and you might think, if you were an Austrian German, you might exclaim, so ein Schmarrn, and it's an idiomatic phrase meaning what a load of nonsense, but it does come from that pan I'm using, because Schmarrn comes from schmieren, to grease, to smear. So, you know, something braised, I suppose, in a pan. Actually, what we did use the pan for was making pancakes. So in Germany, this would be Pfannkuchen, but not so in Austria, where it would be Palatschinke. Well, actually, Palatschinken, there's some debate on this. It comes from Hungarian via Romanian, and obviously, perhaps it comes from the word placenta, as in, you know, afterbirth. The more Germanic name for which would be Mutterkuchen, yeah, mother cake, literally. And if we looked it up in a publication such as Duden's Wie sagt man in Österreich, so what do they say in Austria, you'd find die, singular, die Palatschinke. But a much more useful publication, I think, is a book by Peter Wehler called Sprechen Sie Wienerisch? Do you speak Viennese? And it tells us that there is no such thing as the singular form. Eine Palatschinke gibt es nicht. Wenn man sie unbedingt will, muss man erhäuberte Portion Palatschinken bestellen. So, you know, no such thing as one pancake. You have to order half a portion of pancakes. Right then, so let's look at these ingredients that I found. And if you have German, you will be expecting to hear that it's the good old Kartoffel, die Kartoffel. But no, you would be wrong, of course, because in Austria, it's der Erdapfel. The Austrians taking the French approach there, I suppose, with the pomme de terre, the earth apple. You might expect the humble cauliflower here to be der Blumenkohl, but you'd be wrong again, because it's der Kaffeeol, and here Austria is borrowing from Italian and getting its cabbage bit, I suppose, from the cavolo, and the flower bit from the fiore. So you can see lots of Austrian words borrowing from neighboring countries, or countries part of which were subsumed under its own empire once upon a time. The tomato, well, yes, Austrians do call it die Tomate, but they also call them der Paradeiser, and this is from the idea of the Paradiesapfel. It's a term that is, alas, dying out in Austria. You don't hear Paradeiser too often these days. Okay, so what else have we got? We've got our apricots, and there you might be expecting to hear that it's die Aprikose, but no, not so. I wonder if anybody does know the Austrian, and do pitch into the chat if you know these words. It's die Marille. So this is actually from an archaic Italian word. The Italians don't call them armelino anymore. I gather they call them albicocca. So that's where the term apricot's from. The spinach, and yes, it was in my fridge, is indeed der Spinat, in Austrian German as in German. And so I did decide, although mine didn't look quite as nice as the picture here on the right hand side, to make some Spinatknödel. Yes, some spinach dumplings. You've got to do something to, you know, take away some of the goodness in spinach. And so these dumplings are called Knödel in Austrian German, but in standard German it would be a Kloß. So Spinatklöße is what they'd be called in most parts of Germany. And these words both go back actually to the word Knoten, and they denote a kind of thickish mass. I think they also get used as derogatory terms in German. I think just as we use the word dumpling actually derogatively too in English. So finally, I thought I should just point out that when we talk about German, we are indeed not just talking about Germany, and we're not just talking about German culture. We are using the word, I suppose German studies or Germanic studies really means German language culture. So we do, of course, in our teaching, as I'm sure is the case in schools and colleges. We use literature, film, we use everyday cultural examples, language texts relating to contemporary Austria or to its politics, history and society in our language teaching, but also in our cultural teaching. We would use Austrian authors, and I offer a whole specialist option at Lancaster on post-war Austria. Okay, so what about research? You might be wondering whether this knowledge of Austrian German comes in handy for analysing Austrian authors, whether it's useful for an academic in their research. And I would say absolutely. My colleagues at Lancaster also incorporate examples of Austrian culture in their research. For my part, I've made a bit of a specialism of studying Austria, and this book I published last year. It's really a book about protest culture. I'm looking at some of the manifestations of protest against the far right in Austria. So if you like, as well as explaining the political history to the successful incorporation of Austria's far-right Freedom Party into a coalition government in the year 2000, I'm looking in that book at examples of music, film, novels, plays that express resistance to the far right and protest it, if you like. So I've also got examples of popular everyday kinds of protest. That would be demonstrations, civil organizations, slogans, if you like. That were prevalent, particularly from the period 2000 to 2006. I've written on many different Austrian authors, filmmakers, playwrights, and so on. But I think it's fair to say that one in particular has a special place in my academic attentions. And does my Austrian German help me with my reading of Elfriede Jelinek? You may be wondering, or not. Well, I suppose the answer is not overly. This is not an author who writes in dialect. There are little bits of it, hence this little slide. But you do obviously need to know something about contemporary Austria, its history, its politics, in order to get the most out of reading Elfriede Jelinek, the Nobel Prize laureate writer. And I thought, well, I just finished by perhaps nodding to this work, this play called Burgtheater, which is in the collection here, Theaterstücke, which I grabbed down from my bookshelf. Here we go, you can see me now. So right at the start of the play, we're told, sehr wichtig ist die Behandlung der Sprache. Sie ist als eine Art Kunstsprache zu verstehen, nur Anklänge an den echten Wiener Dialekt. Yeah, so the treatment of language is very important. It should be taken as a kind of artificial language, Kunstsprache, and only hints of the real Viennese dialect should be heard. Yeah, she goes on further to say it's actually desirable if you can get a German actor to play this part, because then their Austrian, their Viennese is going to sound doubly estranged, if you like. Probably a kind of Brechtian alienation technique. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. Just a little bit of an insight, and I'm hoping that if there are more detailed questions, you might like to ask me those in the chat, and I can get back to you at the end of our session. So on now to Sascha.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Allyson. I could see there are already lots of questions in the chat. Brilliant. So please keep them coming. Now, I'm going to take the last part of this seminar. But before I do, just a very, very short intermezzo. Just to give you 3 links here, and to say that if you would like to give us feedback on these seminars, especially if you want to suggest a few seminars that we could hold in the future, you've got a link there. It's tiny.cc/languagesfeedback. And the other thing is, if you want to be added to our mailing list, so we can email you and tell you about any future events, there's a form for that as well. Unfortunately, you have to give us explicit consent to do so. So therefore, you have this form there, lancaster.ac.uk/study/expression of interest. And finally, last week, we had a brilliant French seminar. And at the end, some of you said, could we learn a bit more about the sort of courses you're offering? Of course you could. This is not really the time and place for this, because this is meant to be more like a taster seminar. But if you'd like to learn more about our courses, we have open days coming up. The next one is at the end of June. And you've got a link there as well where you can register, and it's very likely going to be online this time. Brilliant. So now I'm going to start with my part. Now, what I would like to talk to you about in this part is a very interesting aspect of German culture, and particularly something that you may feel might be quite different from what you experience in the UK or elsewhere. And that's the topic of patriotism and national identity in Germany. So obviously that's a very huge and very complex topic, and I can't possibly really do it justice here. But I just wanted to give you a bit of an idea of what it might look like if we discuss such a topic at university, okay? Now, what do I mean by patriotism, national identity? I mean something like, if you ask a German person, are you actually proud to be German? What might they reply? So I've actually did that. I've actually asked some German people, are you actually proud to be German? Sind Sie eigentlich stolz, Deutscher oder Deutsche zu sein? Are you proud to be German? And I thought I'd very, very quickly show you one of the responses. I can show you a very quick video where a German person answered this question and told us a little bit. The video is in German, but there are English subtitles. So now let me just briefly get that video up. So I'm just going to briefly share my screen with you so you can see my terrible desktop. And here you should have the video. I hope you can see it.
Also, ob ich stolz darauf bin, Deutsche zu sein, das ist eine schwierige Frage, weil das, glaube ich, für Leute meiner Generation, ich bin ja jetzt nicht mehr ganz jung, ein bisschen schwierig ist. Also ich bin geboren, da stand die Berliner Mauer noch, meine Großeltern waren noch im Krieg, mein Großvater war zum Beispiel in der Wehrmacht. Das heißt, ich kenne noch Leute, die mit dem Krieg zu tun hatten, und ich bin aufgewachsen damit, dass das alles sehr, sehr schwierig war, problematisch war, dass man nicht gerne gesagt hat, dass man Deutsche ist, und auch im Ausland das möglichst vertuscht hat, nicht unbedingt sagen wollte. Und wenn man meinen Akzent nicht gehört hat und nicht gehört hat, dass ich Deutsche bin, dann war ich immer sehr stolz. Ich habe das auch sehr spät immer nur zugegeben. Ich glaube, unsere Generation, da wir sehr, sehr viel über den Krieg und so weiter gelernt haben, in der Schule auch, und wie wichtig das alles war, auch mit den neuen Bewegungen, mit der AfD und so etwas, das bringt uns alle sehr, ja, das macht uns etwas betroffen. Und ich glaube, deswegen sind wir alle eher Europäer. Also ich fühle mich sehr viel mehr als Europäerin, als dass ich mich als Deutsche fühle.
Okay. Now. Okay. So just to give you a bit of an impression of what you might get from a German person, obviously this is just one German person and we're really generalizing here. So I'm just going to get the slides back up. Okay, now bear with me. There's lots of slides here. Here we go. Okay. Now, there's one big exception to this. So one big exception and one case where actually German people do feel more comfortable saying, yes, I'm proud to be German. And yes, there is such a thing as German identity. And that is football. Yeah. Now you can see here, you can see a headline from a German newspaper that says, was soll die Schland-Euphorie? Just to explain, Schland is when you say the German word for Germany, Deutschland, and you say it, you shout it, as if you're in like a football stadium, you say Schland. Yeah? So football seems to be one of those rare exceptions where Germans feel quite comfortable to say, yeah, it's actually good to be German, I'm supporting my team. Yeah, and that is sometimes criticized. Yeah? So you have this here, this is a banner that I've found somewhere, and it actually says, Fußball ja, Nationalstolz nein. So football, yes, let's support football, but no, let's not support national pride or patriotism. So it's sometimes criticized, sometimes called party patriotismus, so party patriotism. So yeah, people are still not quite comfortable with that. Okay, now another interesting thing is there's actually such a complex relationship in Germany between football and patriotism that even entire academic books have been written about this, about football and national pride, which I think is very interesting. Okay, now let's take a look at why that might be the way it is. Now I've brought a little picture for you here. Maybe have a quick think about this. Can anyone guess what you can see here? If you can, maybe put it in the chat. Yes, fantastic. I can already see people giving the right answer. This is Berlin. And this is Berlin taken, it's a picture of Berlin at night, taken from space, taken from about 200 miles above the Earth. And it was taken by the Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield. And he found that if you actually look at the lights, you can still see the divide between East and West Berlin. And you can actually see the line where the wall used to be. Very interesting to do with the fact that different light bulbs were used for street lighting and things like that. But it's very interesting how from space you can still see those important historical and cultural issues. I've given you a little link here. It's a Guardian article. If you're interested in this, you can read more about this here. And just a quick anecdote. This is actually something that I'm really interested in. I worked with a few colleagues on images from space and what they can tell us about history and culture nowadays. And there you can see us present a few of our findings at Light Up Lancaster, an annual festival here in Lancaster. Okay. The second thing I would like to show you is a quote by Friedrich Schiller and Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Schiller and Goethe, if you don't know them, they are two big German poets, writers, probably two of the most famous German writers ever. And they've said already in the 18th, early 19th century, Deutschland, aber wo liegt es? Ich weiß das Land nicht zu finden. Ne? Deutschland, aber wo liegt es? Ich weiß das Land nicht zu finden. So Germany, but where is it? I can't find the country. And I think that's very interesting because you can see that it is, even back then in the 18th, 19th century, people weren't really sure what it actually is, Germany. And Germany has a really, really long history of being divided in lots of different ways. And you can still see that today in the fact that there are lots of different, distinct regional identities. So for example, if you think of stereotypes about Germany, you will often probably say, oh, someone wearing lederhosen, drinking beer and eating sausage. That is absolutely nothing to do with the region where I'm from, because I'm from the Northwest. And that's all very sort of Bavarian stereotypes. Okay, now this is one of the reasons why it might be difficult to talk about a German identity. Another reason, obviously, is to do with the German past. Yeah, so I can see some people saying in the chat they can't see the slides. Is it working for most people? I might just reload them again. That might do it. Okay, I might reload them again, so maybe that helps a few more people to see them. Okay, working for most people. Okay, let's see. And so that is actually to do with the German past, as you all know, is very complex and very difficult. And one thing that's sort of like concerns historians and other people in German studies is a concept called Vergangenheitsbewältigung. You can see that here. That's another one of those very long German words, compound nouns. It literally means something like overcoming the past. So it is the idea that you think about what happened in the past and basically the question, how do German people deal with the fact that they are from a country that has such a complicated and difficult past? And how does that affect them nowadays? So you can see a bit of a definition here. So the term Vergangenheitsbewältigung entered the post-war German vocabulary to denote the complex and often controversial process of how Germans dealt with the enormity of the crimes against humanity committed by the Nazis during the Third Reich. Yeah. Now, this is an idea that is often criticized. So you can see a quote from one of our former presidents who said in German, es geht nicht darum, Vergangenheit zu bewältigen, das kann man gar nicht. Sie lässt sich ja nicht nachträglich ändern oder ungeschehen machen. Wer aber vor der Vergangenheit die Augen schließt, wird blind für die Gegenwart. So it's not really a question of coming to terms or overcoming the past. That cannot be done, but it's more about thinking how the past shapes us and what it might mean for the present and the future. Now, I'm going to skip this briefly. What I wanted to look at in particular is this, and you might have seen it before, or you might have actually been there. This is the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin. And the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin is right next to the Brandenburger Tor, the Brandenburg Gate, so one of the most famous German landmarks ever. And it was established around 15 years ago. And for those of you who haven't been there, it looks basically like lots of big concrete blocks in a field, in a concrete field. And they are different heights, different sizes, and they're all gray. And many people say it reminds them a little bit of gravestones. Yeah? And the other effect it has, when you actually go into it, given that they all have different sizes and heights, you feel a bit like you get sucked into it. And suddenly all those stones, blocks, they are taller than you and you're in the middle of them. So it's actually quite an intense experience walking in that field. I think it is a very interesting example of what I just told you about, of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, or a way of both remembering the past and sort of trying to, I don't want to say try to move on because that's too simplistic, but trying to find a way of dealing with it. Yeah, and it is actually quite controversial because lots of people say it is often misused by people. So when you go there, you will find people having picnics there, or children playing there, and there are photo shoots with models there. And lots of people say, oh, this makes me a bit uncomfortable. It shouldn't be like that. And I've got a very interesting quote from the architect who was asked about this in an interview. And he said in German, wenn man morgen die Steine umwerfen möchte, mal ehrlich, dann ist das in Ordnung. Menschen werden in dem Feld picknicken. Kinder werden in dem Feld Fangen spielen. Es wird Mannequins geben, die hier posieren, und es werden hier Filme gedreht werden. Ich kann mir gut vorstellen, wie eine Schießerei zwischen Spionen in dem Feld endet. Es ist kein heiliger Ort. So he basically says, well, if people do knock down those stones or have picnics there, or people playing there, or people doing photo shoots there, then that's okay. Because this is not a sacred place. It's people's way of dealing with it. That's basically what the architect says. I'm not sure if I agree with him, because I think to many people it is a sacred place, but I think it's a very interesting perception I wanted to share with you. Okay, now I'm nearly at the end, but one more thing I wanted to tell you is that this concept of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, and some of you, especially those of you who are already studying German, will know this. You can find this all over German literature, film, music, sport even. So you find lots of references to the German past and to how Germans might be dealing with it at this point. Some of you may know the novel Der Vorleser by Bernhard Schlink, The Reader in English, also a famous film with Kate Winslet. And another thing I find really interesting is how it is used in music. So this is a song I would recommend to you. Just be warned, there's some swear words in there, a few sexual references, so maybe do check with your parents if you're underage. It's called Deutschland by die Prinzen. And it's basically a very satirical, ironic song with lots of humor, lots of references. And they basically talk about Germany and Germans and their relationship to their own country and national identity. And there's one line in particular that stands out to me. And that is when they sing, wir können stolz auf Deutschland Schwein. Yeah, wir können stolz auf Deutschland Schwein. And what they're trying to say is we can be proud of Germany, but they don't say we can be proud of Germany. They use another word that rhymes with be, sein, and that is Schwein, which means pig, which is an insult, a provocation. So you can interpret this in different ways. You could say, oh, maybe they just can't say it. They find it hard to say it, or maybe they want to criticize it. I'll leave it to you to think about this. I think it's very interesting. Okay. And this is my final slide before we move on to the Q&A. This is the cover of a very famous German news magazine, Der Spiegel. And this is from 2014. And they did a feature on this question, what is German identity and how do Germans deal with patriotism in their past? And you can see here, the title is Wir sind wieder wer. Now this hints at something that happened in 1954. You may have heard of Das Wunder von Bern, the Miracle of Bern, where Germany won the Football World Cup very shortly after the war. And this line was all over the news. Wir sind wieder wer. We are someone again. Yeah, and now the Spiegel magazine here changed it slightly and turned it into a question. Wir sind wieder wer. We are again who. And you might recognize that the person in the middle is supposed to be Angela Merkel. You can see her gesture, her very famous gesture. On the left, you have a football player. On the right, you have a woman wearing a burqa, or wearing the German flag as a burqa. So this just raises the question of what actually is German identity and how complex it is. I don't really have time to go into it in detail, but I thought I'd leave this for you to think about and to take away. Okay, so that's my part. We've got about 10 minutes or so for question and answers. We can also stay a bit longer if you have more questions. So before we do that, just to remind you, please do let us know what you would like to see in the future. And do stay in touch with us. We'll put a recording of this on our YouTube channel afterwards, so you can watch it again. Our YouTube channel is Languages and Cultures at Lancaster University. And then I think I pass over to Chris. Are there any questions, Chris, for any of us?
Hi, yeah, we've got lots of questions today, which is really good to see. In fact, I'm not even sure whether we'll manage to get through all of them. I'm just going to bring up the slides in half a second. Let's bring them up. Hopefully, can you see those okay?
Yeah.
That's the later questions. Let's start with some of the questions that relate to Marion's really enjoyable presentation. Is it true that Germans have a hard time in the UK because they miss good bread so much?
Hi. It's a common thing for Germans to talk about that they are not getting bread or giving recommendations to each other. I found this little bakery and they are doing like proper rye bread, you know? So yeah, I definitely had this. I feel I'm personally quite adaptable, but I do love bread. Like people in Spain and also here in the UK told me that I've never seen a person buying that much bread like I do. So it is a thing. We go out and look for it. Yeah, it seems to come up.
Thanks very much. There were lots of people sharing their favorite compound nouns. We have so many questions, I'm not sure how much time to spend on this, but are there any others that you'd like to share?
Me or us?
Any of the speakers, actually. Particular favorites.
I've seen some. They were great. Like we have lots of others. We have lots of funny ones like Torschlusspanik. This is like the anxiety that you don't make something in time, or that you don't find like a partner, someone to marry and settle down with in time. It's a good one. Yeah. Maybe anyone else wants to say their favorite one?
I think I've mentioned my favorite one over and over again. The bagpiping is an absolute favorite of mine.
True. Yeah.
Somebody already bagged mine in the chat, which is Geschwindigkeitsbeschränkung. I love the sounds of that particular one, and it's rotten to go calling it tempo limit instead. Bring back Geschwindigkeitsbeschränkung.
All right.
Thanks very much, everyone. Juliana said, also asked, I think this was probably a rhetorical question, why would you just have one pancake? Which I think is a very good point. And so we move on to some that were for Allyson specifically. There's one from Mullis H, who I think he got a bit of an answer from Allyson already, but would it not be Schinken because it is a plural noun, or is Austrian dialect of German not the same?
Yeah, it's deceptive. It's because it sounds like it comes from Schinken, ham, but it doesn't. It comes from placenta, palat. Well, it's the Hungarian, and I wish my colleague Erika were here to help me out with the Hungarian pronunciation. But palacinka is the Hungarian word for pancake. It comes from the word placenta. The Hungarians use this word, and Austrian German has borrowed it from them. So it doesn't actually have anything to do with Schinken at all. Right, whoever asked, why would you have one pancake?
I'm sure lots of people will be asking that too. We also had a really interesting question from Juliet, which was, if you were to speak German in Austria, would you still be understood?
You absolutely would. And of course, it's more like the other way if you spoke Austrian or Bavarian dialect too. In northern parts of Germany, would you still be understood there? And it's one of these classic, if you spoke broad Glaswegian down in, I don't know, London or Kent or somewhere, would people understand you? And the answer is, I don't know, actually, possibly some people wouldn't. Or there might be a bit of a delay whilst they work out, did I understand that correctly? So it's the other direction, actually. And without going into too much kind of Austro-German warring here, it would be fair to say that German accents in Austria are heard a little bit cautiously. Sometimes they are met with a little bit of animosity. There is a there's an Austrian word for, I suppose, a derogatory term for Germans, which is Piefke, and that kind of comes across a bit like a Scots person saying assassinach or something like that. So there is these nice equivalents. Don't think we've got time for the derivations there, but great question.
Okay, thanks very much to Juliet and Allyson. Moving on, we had a question from Eleanor and from Syria for all of the speakers. Are you proud to be German? How do you feel about national identity?
Oh, that's a tricky one, isn't it? I think I feel very much like the person in the video that I showed earlier. So I think obviously as an academic, as someone who works in things, I find it hard to be proud of a country anyway, because I would say I can't really be proud of a country. I can be proud of something I've achieved, for example. So I never really identify with patriotism in that way. So, but I think what the person in the video said, I really, really agree with. So it is very difficult for us Germans to say we are proud to be German. And that's maybe not even a bad thing. I don't know what my colleagues think, Marion.
Yeah, I think I answered this a little bit in the chat. Although I want to say proud is maybe the wrong word, because I always felt like you can't be proud of a coincidence. Like, yeah, I've been born in Germany to German parents, but it's not an achievement or anything of myself. So I'm very much with the person from the video and what Sascha said. However, I come from Cologne, it's my hometown, and we do have this local patriotism, this kind of local pride. So I kind of like to tell people not, hey, I'm from Germany, but hey, I'm from Cologne, because I do identify with my hometown much more than with the country as a whole. Yeah. I have to leave you now, but my colleagues are happy to answer all further questions.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, Chris, Allyson, are you happy to stay on for another 10 minutes? And maybe even if people have to leave, we can just record our answers to the questions. And we put this recording on our YouTube channel afterwards, so people can just watch if they can't stay.
Sure.
Great. Sure. Chris, I'm not sure we're seeing the right slide. We're just seeing the same slide the whole time right now.
Can you see the one about are you proud to be German?
No, we can see Cyril is asking, what do you personally think of this Holocaust memorial? If not, don't worry, we can just do it. We can just talk.
Let's see, it should.
Anyway, so to anyone who needs to leave now, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciated you being here, and we hope you learned something new. For those of you who can't stay, please do stay, and we're happy to answer all questions.
Okay, can you see a different slide now, Sascha?
Yeah, that looks good.
Great. So if you're happy to continue for a bit, we had a few questions, including one from Cyril about other geographic identities that German people might identify with, for example, being pro-European or seeing themselves as European. We heard a little bit about regional identities too, about Cologne. So is there anything you'd like to add to that, Sascha?
Yeah, I think the point about Europeanness is a very good one. I think that's something you will hear a lot from German people, saying that they prefer to say they're European than being German. My impression is that Germany is a very pro-European country, and that's definitely a feeling among many Germans. And regional identities, as I mentioned before. So we have lots of different regions in Germany, but also in Austria and Switzerland and other German-speaking countries. And I do think regional identity plays a big role.
Yeah, I'm not German, of course, but I think those of you who are studying German you'll be aware that in terms of regional identities, that there is still, like it or not, there is still an East-West kind of flavor to Germany today, and it was a phrase coined in the 90s, die Mauer im Kopf, the wall in your head, but you know, statistics of all kinds do show that there are still some differences, as it were, physical, tangible differences in terms of, if you like, net income, voting preferences, etc., as well as the less tangible, how people feel about their national identity and what they associate with. So it's worth kind of, you know, factoring in the inner German identities, definitely.
Yeah, East-West, and I also think North-South. My personal impression is that sort of divide is actually increasing nowadays, the North-South divide. But that's just my personal impression.
I don't know the answer to that one, Sascha. You know, we in German you talk about the Weißwurstlinie, don't you?
You do indeed, yeah.
Kind of, what would we say, the Watford gap, you know, where the South stops and the North begins, as it were. And yeah, that North-South does come into it, definitely. Yep.
Great. Maybe we could move on to a related question, which was from Oliver, which is, do Austrians feel the same way about national pride?
Yeah. Well, Oliver, this is a really interesting question, isn't it? Because you know, Austria's post-war developments are very different to Germany's, and and I think there you have to factor in, it's inevitable that Austria was, as it were, allowed to call itself the first victim of Hitlerite aggression, you know, that it was invaded and somehow therefore was a victim. This goes back to the Moscow Declaration of 1943, actually, trying to spur the Austrians on to do something about their situation. But it did allow decades of Austrian development thinking, well, you know, this whole guilt about the Nazi period is really something German and not something Austrian. And it took much later in Austria for there to be a reckoning and a full investigation of Austria's very real part in National Socialist crimes and atrocities. So, you know, that's coloured things in the historical dimension. National pride, if you like, in a less political sense, I think they feel unproblematic in many ways about saying, yes, we're proud to be Austrian. And alluding to what I was saying earlier, some of it is we're proud to not be German. But picking up on Sascha's football examples will give you a little flavour of what I'm talking about here. So if we talk about Austria as a footballing nation, well, we're not going to get anywhere on this one. Skiing, yes, but not football. So the kind of date that goes down in the Austrian psyche, the Austrian collective consciousness, if you like, is not having won the World Cup, because they haven't. And England, let's face it, goes right back to 1966. But Austria remembers the World Cup finals in 1970, someone's going to correct me here, 76, or was it 78, in Cordoba, in Argentina, because they didn't win. They came 13th overall, but they beat Germany. So, you know, you can see the way football continues to impact in terms of national pride, but a very different flavour and meaning. To have beaten Germany was enough of a success.
1978, says someone in the chat.
Thank you.
Great, thanks very much for that, Allyson. Do we have time for a few more, Sascha?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, absolutely.
Joseph was asking, why does the Holocaust Memorial use the word, forgive my pronunciation, Mahnmal rather than Denkmal?
That's perfect pronunciation, Chris. That's an excellent question. Joseph, you're absolutely right that Denkmal is the standard translation for monument or memorial. It uses Mahnmal here because Mahnmal comes from mahnen, with the verb mahnen, which means to urge or to, Allyson, help me, how would you translate mahnen? I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. To warn, to admonish.
To warn, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it uses this here to basically warn people against sort of like allowing something like that to happen again. Absolutely. So Mahnmal is a bit stronger than Denkmal.
Yeah, it's a very good distinction. Quite a useful one, really.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Sascha. We had two more questions. I can't actually see the chat right now without leaving the presentation, so
I'm keeping an eye on it. There's nothing new.
During your presentation, you told us some really interesting things about what the architect had said about the Holocaust Memorial, but you said that you weren't quite sure whether you agreed or not with his comments. So Cyril was asking, what do you think about, what were you alluding to there?
Yeah, good question. So I think I like the memorial, and I think it's really impressive. And if you're actually there, it looks from the outside, it looks like just a few concrete blocks and nothing special. But when you're in there, actually, the feeling you get is actually really, really intense because of what I said earlier, that you have these different heights and you suddenly feel like, oh, how did they grow? They didn't actually grow, but you just don't realize how different they are in height. So in terms of what the architect says, I can see where he's coming from, and I agree with him that people should be allowed to deal with things the way they want to be and sort of explore ways for them to use it. And of course, it's not a sacred place, it's not a church or anything like that. But I also see how people might get uncomfortable with someone saying, oh, let's have people have picnics there. And I think people might feel that that could be a bit disrespectful. So I'm in two minds about it. I'd rather not really position myself clearly because I wouldn't really know how to be honest.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I wonder if our questioner has been there. I think everybody reacts differently, and that's the beauty of it in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's complex. People utilize space. I think we've all seen the shocking pictures of dark tourism visitors, people going to Auschwitz and taking selfies, and there is something about how you behave in these places, but there is something regenerative about, you know, young children, you know, if you like, colonizing space and playing there. And it's complex. There's one in Vienna by Heuchert, and they had to put barbed wire over a flat surface. It was a depiction of Jews scrubbing the streets, but people were sitting on the flat back of the sculpture of the person scrubbing the street, and you know, clearly it's just not right to go sitting on that surface, so it had to be modified as a result. Mm-hmm. I like the Berlin memorial, but I think we all react differently.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, our last question was from M, and yeah, perhaps it's a good question to end on, actually. To what extent do you think this dangerous feeling of national pride is still prevalent in Germany today?
It's a good question to end on, a very difficult question to end on as well, but a great question. So, I mean, we can see that, again, something that was mentioned by that person in the video who mentioned the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, the alternative for Germany. So this sort of like a right-wing party that has had quite significant successes in some regions of Germany. So you can see that, well, on the one hand, you have German people who say, oh, national pride is something very difficult for me, and I don't really identify with Germanness, if that's a thing. On the other hand, you still have far-right movements like you have in many other countries. So national pride, if it's sort of if it becomes too extreme, it can easily turn to nationalism, if you ask me. And of course, that is very dangerous. It's a bit simplified, but yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's dangerous national pride in all countries.
Exactly.
Not least in the one I'm resident in. And, you know, as a non-German, I think I don't know, I'm just happy when I see more positive manifestations of national pride. And I think the thing is that Germans they're much more informed and conscious of what goes into making national pride and what the rhetoric around it. And that can only be a good thing. I think we just need to educate ourselves more in any country about these feelings, these emotions, and celebrate as well as mahnen, as well as warn about where things can go wrong. If we keep the balance, then we're doing a good job. So let's be proud, but let's be conscious.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Sounds like a great note to end on. Perhaps I can pass back to you, Sascha.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks for everyone who stayed this long. That's really, really brilliant. So thanks again for joining us. I think it was a really, really good seminar. Really good to hear all your questions and comments. Fantastic participation. So well done to all of you. Thanks to Allyson, Marion, and Chris. And yeah, I think yeah, it was very nice. So next week we're doing Chinese, same time, 12 o'clock Chinese. The week after we've got, oh, let me get this right, Spanish and then Italian, I think. And then we've got a session on translating and interpreting. So please do join us again every Wednesday, 12 to 1. And yeah, thank you very much. Goodbye. Auf Wiedersehen. Tschüss.
Ciao.